I grew up believing my father was the kind of man you admired. He was strong, principled, the kind of person others looked up to. Quiet, composed, never cruel. He taught me how to tie a tie, how to shake hands firmly, and how to never ask questions. That stirred up trouble. But the day my grandfather died, everything changed. It didn't happen with a confession. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, barely more than a whisper. He reached out, gripped my hand with surprising strength, and said, "Just one sentence. You need to know the truth about your father." 16 words that shattered a lifetime of certainty. What followed was a trail of secrets buried deeper than I could have imagined. A hidden letter, a missing woman, a child no one wanted to claim, and a grandfather who carried the weight of a lie until his final breath, because no one else in the family had the courage to speak it. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew where I came from. But that day, I learned that sometimes the people we admire most are the ones hiding the darkest truths. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We read every message, and your presence here means more than you know. Enjoy the story. The call came just after midnight. I was sitting alone in my apartment, working late like always, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. There was no greeting, no hesitation, just her voice, flat and tired. "It's your grandfather. They don't think he'll make it through the weekend." I didn't ask questions, didn't offer condolences. I just said, "I'll be there by morning." The drive back to my hometown was long and silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like gravity. I hadn't been back in over 5 years. Not since the tension between me and my father had reached a quiet boiling point that neither of us ever addressed. That was just how my family operated. We didn't fight. We withdrew. The hospital smelled like every hospital, antiseptic and time. My mother met me in the hallway, her eyes red but dry. "He's been asking for you," she said. The words felt heavy, like an accusation, and a plea at the same time. I stepped into the room. My grandfather lay in the bed, smaller than I remembered. His once broad shoulders now sunken beneath crisp white sheets. Machines beeped quietly at his side, but his eyes, though dim, were open. He looked at me and smiled, not with his mouth, but with something deeper. "There he is," he said, voice ragged. "Took you long enough." I laughed softly, pulling a chair beside him. "You always did have a dramatic sense of timing." He chuckled, then coughed, then winced. For a while, we just sat there. No talk of the past. No forced sentiment. Just the creak of the machines and the whisper of things we didn't yet know how to say. Then, he reached out his hand. It trembled, bony and cold, but strong in its own quiet way. I took it. He held on tighter than I expected, and when he spoke again, his voice dropped, barely more than a breath. "You need to know the truth about your father." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "What?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Everything you think you know, it's not the whole story." A nurse entered just then, checking his vitals, adjusting his fluids, and the moment slipped away like sand through fingers. He never finished the sentence. Later that night, he fell into a deep sleep. They said it could be hours, maybe days, maybe never again. I sat by his bed, that one sentence echoing in my mind like a bell tolling through empty halls. "You need to know the truth about your father." What truth? That he was cold? That he rarely showed affection? That he cared more about appearances than emotions? Those weren't secrets. Those were facts we all quietly lived with. No, it had to be something else, something deeper. I stepped outside for air, pacing beneath the flickering hospital light. I thought about the way my father never talked about his own childhood, how he flinched at old photos, how he once ripped a page out of our family album and threw it in the fireplace without explanation. He was a man built on control, discipline, reputation. But now I wondered if all of that had been armor. If behind the carefully constructed facade was something fractured, and my grandfather had seen it all. He had lived with it, protected it, and only now, on the edge of death, was he ready to let go. When I returned to the room, my grandfather was still asleep. I sat back down, held his hand again and whispered, "I don't know what you meant, but I'll find out." I didn't know if he heard me, but his fingers twitched slightly in mine. That was enough. The next morning, he was gone. Peaceful, the nurse said. He died just before sunrise, when the world was still and the sky was bleeding pink and gold over the horizon. We held the service the following week, small, intimate, just close family and a few neighbors, who remembered him as a man who always nodded politely but never said too much. He left behind only one request, that I be the one to sort through his things. At first, I thought it was sentiment, but when I returned to his house and found the old Bible on his nightstand, worn, leather-bound, and hollowed out in the center, I realized it wasn't just inheritance. It was invitation. Inside the hollowed space was a single envelope, my name written on the front, and in my grandfather's handwriting, just one word, begin. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. It wasn't sealed, just folded shut. My name written in sharp, slanted strokes across the front. No date, no greeting, just the single word, begin. I sat on the edge of my grandfather's bed, the Bible beside me, the room silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock above the dresser. I unfolded the letter slowly, half expecting it to crumble in my hands. The handwriting was unmistakably his, steady and measured, though there were slight hesitations in the curves, like his hand had trembled while writing. Daniel, if you're reading this, then it means I wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. I waited too long. I told myself it wasn't my place, that it would only cause pain. But in the end, silence is just another kind of lie. There's something you need to know about your father, something no one ever told you, something he never told you. And it begins with a woman named Anna. The name hit like a match in the dark. I had never heard it before. It didn't belong to our family tree, not to any story I'd ever been told. Anna was the first woman your father ever loved. He met her when he was young, barely 20. They were inseparable. Your grandmother didn't approve. She said Anna was unsuitable, that she would ruin your father's future. But he didn't care. He loved her, and she loved him. Then one day, she was gone. I paused. Read that line again. One day she was gone. No explanation, no reason, no trace. Your father told us she left, that she wasn't who he thought she was, that she'd run off, taken money, betrayed him. But I never believed him. There was something in his eyes when he said it, too calm, too rehearsed, and then I found the letter. I felt a chill run down my back. I flipped to the next page. There were 3 in total. It was hidden in the lining of his suitcase. A letter from Anna, written days before she vanished. She was scared. She said people were threatening her, that she was being followed, that she thought your father knew, that he might have even been involved. She was pregnant, Daniel, and she was terrified. I never showed him I found it. I kept it to myself. And when I finally tried to find her, it was too late. No one knew where she'd gone. The address on the letter was fake. And your father refused to speak her name again. He moved on, built his life, married your mother, raised you, and the world saw a man of principle. But I saw something else. I saw guilt. I saw distance. I saw a man building walls around a secret he never wanted to face. I leaned back against the wall. The breath caught in my throat. A missing woman. A pregnancy. A possible cover-up. And my father at the center of it all. The final page of the letter was short, more vulnerable, almost childlike. I should have done more. I should have searched harder. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Maybe I didn't want to believe my own son was capable of that kind of betrayal. But I believe you are stronger than I was. And if you choose to search, you won't be alone. Start with the attic. The old chest behind the insulation. What's inside will guide you further. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Grandpa, I sat there for a long time, the pages trembling in my hands. This wasn't just a revelation. It was a summons. My father, the man who raised me with rules and routines, who preached integrity and discipline, had lived with a shadow none of us had ever seen. And my grandfather, he'd lived with the guilt of knowing that shadow was real. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I looked around the room, now feeling less like a space of rest and more like the beginning of a path I couldn't avoid. Behind the insulation in the attic, it was a vague clue. But I knew exactly where to look, because some part of me, some deep, quiet part, had always sensed that our family story had missing pages. Now I was ready to find them. I stood, pocketed the letter, and climbed the stairs to the attic. Door creaked open like a whisper, and the darkness inside welcomed me like a secret finally ready to speak. The attic was colder than I remembered. The air smelled of dust, wood, and something old enough to feel sacred. I hadn't been up here in over a decade, since I was a teenager sneaking around for Christmas presents. Back then, it was just a space filled with forgotten boxes and creaky floorboards. But now, it felt different. It felt like a vault, a place where memories had been buried in insulation instead of soil. I turned on the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. It flickered once, then held. Grandpa's instructions echoed in my mind. Behind the insulation, the old chest. The attic walls were lined with aging fiberglass insulation, yellowed and sagging in some places. I began checking along the far wall, feeling for anything loose. My fingers finally caught on a seam that didn't quite fit. With a quick tug, a panel of insulation peeled back to reveal what had been hidden for decades. A wooden chest. Small. Weathered, covered in a thick layer of dust. I knelt in front of it, heart pounding. The latch wasn't locked, just old. It squeaked when I opened it, as if protesting the light. Inside was a bundle of items, neatly arranged. A stack of letters wrapped in twine, a manila envelope marked "Private" in red Inca cloth pouch, and at the bottom, a photo album with cracked leather binding. I opened the album first, and there she was. Anna. She wasn't labeled, but I knew. I just knew. The first photograph showed her standing in a garden, holding a basket of flowers. Her eyes were bright, her smile soft but full. She looked young, early 20s maybe, but there was a gravity in her expression, like she knew more than she ever said. I flipped the page. There she was again, this time, standing beside a man. My father. But not as I knew him. Younger, softer around the eyes. He had his arm wrapped gently around her waist, and she leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. They looked happy. They looked like a couple in love. My hands trembled. Page after page showed more. Anna laughing in the kitchen. My father brushing her hair from her face. The two of them sitting beneath a tree, her head on his shoulder. And then, the baby. At first I thought it might be me. The resemblance was there, but the timeline didn't add up. The photo was dated. In faded ink. June 1974. I was born 10 years later. The baby looked just a few weeks old, wrapped in a patterned blanket, asleep in Anna's arms. My father stood beside her, hand resting gently on her shoulder, staring down at the child with an unreadable expression. Was it pride, fear, guilt? I flipped the photo over. Written in Anna's handwriting were the words, "Our son. He doesn't have your name, but he has your eyes." I set the photo down, breath caught in my throat. He had a child. Before me, before my mother, before the life we all believed was his beginning, and he never said a word. I opened the manila envelope marked "Private." Inside were photocopies of documents, birth records, hospital notes, even a legal letter from a local lawyer declining to represent Miss A.M. in a custody dispute. One document in particular stopped me cold, a missing persons report, filed 3 months after the last photo of Anna. The name, Anna Marie Caldwell. Age, 24. Last seen, leaving a local women's clinic. No follow-up, no resolution, just a date stamp, case closed, no further action. I felt the weight of the room pressed down on me. This wasn't just a forgotten love story. This was a disappearance, a child, a woman who vanished, and a man, my father, who buried it all. I opened the cloth pouch next. Inside was a locket, gold, slightly tarnished. I clicked it open and found a tiny photo of the baby on one side and Anna on the other. Behind the locket was a small note in Grandpa's handwriting. She gave this to me when she came to the house that night. She was scared. She said he had changed, that he'd threatened her. I didn't believe her. God help me. I told her to go home and rest. She was never seen again. I sat back, head spinning. I had walked into this house to say goodbye to my grandfather, to bury a man I thought I knew. Instead, I was unearthing another kind of grave, one that held years of silence, fear, and carefully constructed illusion. My father wasn't just hiding a child, he was hiding something far worse. A disappearance. Woman. A choice. And I had inherited the fallout. I closed the chest gently, tucking the locket into my pocket. I took the album and the envelope and returned to the main floor, hands still trembling. I poured a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the photo of my father with Anna and their son. This changed everything, not just who he was, but who I was, because out there, somewhere, was a brother I never knew. A life interrupted, a story buried under decades of silence. And I was going to find him, not just for me, not just for Anna, but for the truth. Anna Marie Caldwell. I said the name out loud just to hear how it sounded in my voice. It felt strange, like speaking the name of a ghost. A ghost who had been part of my family's history all along. Only no one had dared to admit it. I opened my laptop and typed her name into a search engine. Nothing. No social media, no articles. No obituaries. I added the word missing. That brought something. A scan of an old newspaper article from 1974, small, buried in the back pages. Just a paragraph. Local woman disappears. Anna M. Caldwell, 24, was reported missing after she failed to return home from a scheduled appointment at the Brookdale Women's Clinic. Friends say she had expressed fear for her safety in the days leading up to her disappearance. Authorities have no suspects at this time. No updates, no follow-up. I searched for the clinic. It had closed in the late 80s, replaced by a parking structure. There was no website, no records, no trace. I tried court records next. That was where things got more complicated. The legal letter I found in the attic had come from a law office, downtown, still in operation. I called them the next morning, explaining I was doing family research and had come across a letter connected to a woman named Anna Caldwell. The receptionist was polite but firm. Client records from that far back would have been archived or destroyed, especially if no official case was opened. Is there any chance someone might remember the name? I asked. Even a former employee? Doubtful. That was almost 50 years ago. I thanked her and hung up, frustrated. It was like Anna had vanished twice, once physically and once in the paperwork. I went back to the documents in the envelope. Most were dry legal memos, but a few stood out. In particular, a handwritten note from someone named M.H. It wasn't addressed to anyone directly, but the tone was urgent. We can't pretend we don't know anymore. She said he threatened her, said he'd ruin her if she ever told anyone. I believed him. I don't anymore. No signature. No date. But it was something. I called Ellie. She was my cousin, my father's niece, closer to me than anyone else in the family. If anyone had heard whispers about Anna, it would have been her. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, what's going on? I need to ask you something, I said. It's kind of intense. Okay, shoot. Do you remember ever hearing the name Anna Caldwell? There was a pause on the other end. Not long, just enough to know it landed. Where did you hear that name? I found a photo, I said, of Dad, with her, and a baby. Ellie exhaled slowly. I thought it was just family gossip. Uncle Sam once mentioned her name when he was drunk, at a wedding. Said something about a girl who disappeared and broke the family. I asked him about it the next day. He denied everything. Did anyone else ever talk about her? No. But now that you mention it, Grandma used to get really quiet whenever someone brought up Dad's college years. She used to say, "That's a chapter better left closed." But why? I asked. What happened to her? Why did no one ever look for her? Ellie sighed. Because the family didn't want to know, or they already knew and didn't want to admit it. We agreed to meet later that week and dig deeper together. She offered to look through some of Grandma's old records, diaries, letters, anything that might contain a thread. When I hung up, I looked again at Anna's photograph. There was something tragic in her eyes. Not because she looked sad, but because she looked sure. Like a woman who had already accepted that she might not be allowed to exist. I placed the photo on the table beside Grandpa's journal and opened a blank notebook. Wrote down every name, date, and clue I had so far, and then, underlined at the top of the page, I wrote, "What happened to Anna Caldwell?" I didn't know how far this story would go. I didn't know who I would hurt along the way, but what I did know was this. My father had built a life on silence, and I was going to tear it down, with truth, because Anna deserved better than a footnote in a forgotten photo album. She deserved to be found. The next morning I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't been there in years. We exchanged birthday texts, holiday calls, but nothing more. My father and I had always kept each other at arm's length. He once told me that distance kept things clean. Now I realized it was also how he kept the truth buried. The driveway was just as I remembered, neatly trimmed hedges, stone path, nothing out of place. My mother opened the door with a warm, practiced smile that faltered the moment she saw my face. "You look tired," she said. "I've been digging through some of Grandpa's things." That was all it took. Her face changed, eyes narrowing. Slightly, shoulders stiffening like she'd just braced for impact. She stepped aside, letting me in. My father was sitting in his favorite chair, reading the paper as if the world outside hadn't cracked open. When I walked in, he looked up. "Didn't expect to see you so soon," he said. "I didn't come to catch up," I replied. He folded the newspaper slowly and set it down. "All right then, let's hear it." I pulled the manila envelope from my bag and placed it on the table between us. He stared at it but didn't touch it. "Where did you get that?" "Grandpa's attic," I said. "He left it for me, along with a letter." He didn't move. I opened the envelope and pulled out the photograph of him with Anna, the one with the baby. "This is real," I said. "She was real, and you had a child with her." Still no reaction, no denial, just silence. Finally, he leaned back and sighed. "You shouldn't have gone looking. And you shouldn't have lied." "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't tell you." "That's the same thing." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "What do you want from me, Daniel? An apology? A confession? You think digging up ghosts is going to fix anything?" "I think she deserved better than to disappear," I said. My mother stepped in, trying to de-escalate. "Daniel, your father did what he thought was best at the time." "What he thought was best?" I repeated. "You both knew, and you said nothing." "She wasn't." "Good for him," my mother said quietly. "She was unstable. She tried to trap him." I felt my chest tighten. "She was pregnant." "That's not a trap. That's a life." My father stood abruptly. "Enough." "No," I said, rising with him. "You don't get to bury this anymore. Grandpa gave me the truth because he couldn't die with it locked inside. And now it's my turn." He stared at me, face hard as stone. "She left," he said flatly. "She ran off. I gave her money to start over and she vanished. I didn't chase her. I didn't fight for custody. I let it go. Because that was the deal. She didn't want anything to do with this family." "She wrote a missing persons report," I shot back. "She said you threatened her." "That's not true." "She disappeared, Dad." His jaw tightened, his hands balled into fists. "You don't know what she was like," he growled. You're looking at photos and letters and pretending you understand what really happened. You weren't there. You're right, I said. I wasn't, because you made sure no one ever would be. The room fell silent. My mother sat back down, wringing her hands. My father stared out the window, his face a battlefield of memory and regret. I have a brother, I said. Don't I? He didn't answer. That was all the answer I needed. I gathered the documents and turned to leave. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. But I won't carry your silence, not anymore. As I stepped outside, the air hit my face like ice. I exhaled, feeling something leave me, a lifetime of unspoken confusion, now finally named. Ellie called later that day. I found something, she said. Grandma's journal. There are pages about Anna. She called her a stain. Said she would destroy everything your father was meant to become. I closed my eyes. So it had been a conspiracy of preservation. They hadn't just protected a son. They had erased a woman. Can you send me copies? I asked. Already scanned. I'll email them tonight. Daniel, I think you need to keep going. I will, I said. For her, and for the child she never got to raise. That night, I sat at my desk with all the pieces in front of me. Photographs, letters, journal pages, legal memos, a name that had once been forgotten, now stitched through every corner of our family's past. Anna hadn't just vanished. She had been erased by the very people who claimed to stand for loyalty, integrity, and honor. But I wasn't going to let that continue. The silence was breaking, and I was going to make sure everyone heard it. I hadn't opened the journal yet. I had seen it in the chest, leather-bound, thick with age, its spine barely holding together, but I had been too focused on the letters, the photos, the documents that screamed for attention. The journal had felt private, too sacred to touch without care. But now, after facing my father and uncovering my grandmother's cruel intentions in her own handwriting, I knew it was time. I lit a small lamp and sat at Grandpa's old desk. The same desk where he used to write birthday cards and balance checkbooks. Now, it would speak in his voice again. The first page was blank. The second held only a date. October 19th, 1974, just 3 months after Anna's disappearance. I heard a knock at the door tonight. Late, almost midnight. I thought it might be one of the neighbors, but it was her, Anna. My eyes widened. I kept reading, heart pounding. She looked exhausted, hair soaked from the rain, eyes wild like she hadn't slept in days. She begged me to listen, said she didn't feel safe, said Samuel had changed, that he wasn't the man she thought he was. I told her to calm down. I made tea. She wouldn't sit still. Kept pacing. Kept glancing at the door like someone was coming. She had a bruise on her wrist. The words felt heavy, like Grandpa had written them with shaking hands. She told me she feared for the baby, said my son had threatened to take him away, said he had friends, people who could make problems disappear. I didn't believe her. I told her Samuel would never hurt a child, that he was just scared. She laughed. Not a bitter laugh, just empty. I flipped to the next page. She asked if she could leave the baby with me, just for the night. Said she'd come back in the morning. I said no. I told her it wasn't safe to do that she should go home, rest, let things cool off. She left without saying goodbye. My throat tightened. That was the last time I saw her. The next day, she didn't answer her phone. Or the day after that. I drove to her apartment. It was empty, no sign of struggle, no note, just gone. I leaned back, stunned. Grandpa had known. He'd seen her, heard her, and still, he had sent her away. I told myself for years that she ran, that she couldn't handle the pressure, that maybe she just wanted a different life. But then I found her letter, tucked behind the drawer in Samuel's desk, a goodbye, but not to him, to the baby, to the life she thought she could protect. The journal included a copy of the letter, photocopied and taped into the page. I read it slowly. To my son, I don't know if you'll ever see this. I hope you never have to. I hope by the time you're old enough to read, You're somewhere safe, loved, free. Your father, I wish he were different. I loved him once. I really did. But he chose a path I couldn't follow. I begged him to change. He said I was weak, that I was ruining his chances, that no one would believe me if I ever tried to tell the truth. So I'm leaving. Not because I want to, but because I have to. I've left everything I can for you. Photos, letters, my locket. I hope someone finds them. I hope someone finds you. And I hope you'll forgive me for disappearing. I sat in silence after reading it, the room impossibly still. She hadn't disappeared by choice. She had been pushed out, isolated, terrified. And no one, not even my grandfather, had stopped it. The next journal entry was dated nearly 6 months later. I went to the police. I brought them the letter, the photos. They said it wasn't enough. Said without a body, without a witness, it was just a woman leaving her life behind. I asked if they'd even looked. The officer shrugged. These girls always come back, he said. I wanted to scream. The following pages were shorter, more scattered, less structured, like Grandpa had written only when the guilt was too heavy to hold. I think about her often, every Sunday, every birthday. I wonder if the boy looks like her. I wish I had let her leave the baby with me. Maybe things would have turned out different. And then Samuel knows I've kept things. I saw him in the attic once, standing over the chest. He said nothing, just looked at me. I closed it. He left the room. We never spoke of it again. My blood ran cold. He knew. My father had known the truth was still alive, in documents, in photos, in memory. And yet he had chosen silence. But Grandpa? He had preserved it, not boldly, not perfectly, but enough. And now he had passed the burden to me. I reached the final page. If anyone is reading this, I hope it means I found my courage. I hope it means the truth is no longer mine to carry alone. Find him, the boy. He deserves to know, and tell her, wherever she is, that I never stopped regretting that night. I closed the journal slowly. I felt like I had just spoken with a man who had spent decades drowning in quiet remorse. He couldn't save her. He couldn't stop what happened, but he could hand me the thread and hope I pulled, and I would, because there was still a boy out there, a man, now, raised without his mother, without his name, without the truth, and I was going to find him, no matter what it cost. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept looping through the same questions. Where had he gone? What name had he been given? Did he even know someone out there once tried to fight for him? The baby in the photograph was no longer a baby. He was a man now, somewhere, living a life detached from a truth he never received, and I needed to find him. The first clue came from one of the hospital records tucked inside the journal. A single line in a patient intake form listed temporary foster placement, March 1975, along with the name of a social worker, Linda Granger. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. I searched online for the name and came across an obituary. Linda Granger, passed in 2011, survived by a daughter, Rebecca Granger, who worked in local child services. It felt like a long shot, but I called. She answered on the second ring. I told her who I was, what I was looking for, and what I had found. To my surprise, she didn't hang up. She didn't even sound shocked. My mother talked about Anna Caldwell once, she said. Said she had one case she could never forget. A young woman scared out of her mind with a newborn and nowhere to go. I froze. Did she ever mention the child? Only that he was placed with a foster family after Anna disappeared. The file was sealed. Is there any way to access it now? She hesitated. Not through official channels. But if you give me a few days, I might be able to help. I thanked her more times than I could count and hung up, my hands shaking. This was real. He existed. I spent the next 2 days organizing everything. The photos, the letters, the journal entries, trying to put together a timeline. I even found an old map and began marking addresses. Anna's last known apartment, the clinic, the police station, the courthouse where the custody petition had been denied. I was tracing the last known steps of someone who had been erased. On the third day, Rebecca called back. "I found him," she said. I stopped breathing. "His name is Michael Avery. He was adopted in 1975 by a couple who moved to Colorado 2 years later. He's lived there ever since, married, 2 kids. Does he know anything?" "No. As far as I can tell, he was never told he was adopted. His parents died a few years ago. There's no surviving family to confirm it." My heart twisted. He'd grown up never knowing where he came from, never even questioning it. Rebecca gave me an address and a phone number. She advised caution. "If you reach out, be gentle. He doesn't know you exist. He doesn't know any of this." I thanked her quietly. I stared at the number for hours. What do you say to someone who shares your blood but none of your memories? Eventually, I dialed. It rang twice. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. Calm, friendly, unaware. I hesitated, then spoke. "Hi, is this Michael Avery?" "Yes, it is. Who's calling?" "My name is Daniel," I said. "And I think I may be your brother." Silence. Then a nervous laugh. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how that sounds. But I have evidence, letters, photos, legal documents. Your birth mother's name was Anna Caldwell. You were born in 1974. You were placed into foster care shortly after she went missing." Still silence. "I don't want to overwhelm you," I said. "I just want a chance to talk, to show you what I've found, and let you decide what to do with it." There was a long pause. Then quietly, "Where are you calling from?" "New York." Another pause. "I live in Boulder," he said. "If you're willing to come here, I'll listen." 2 days later, I was on a plane. I brought only one bag. Inside, the photo album, the journal, the letters, and the locket. I rehearsed what I would say 100 times in my head, but nothing prepared me for the moment I saw him. He opened the door slowly, cautiously. We stared at each other, and I saw it. The resemblance. Not just in the face, but in the eyes. The shape of the jaw. The same uncertain stance I had seen in the mirror 1,000 times. He let me in. We sat across from each other, a coffee table between us. "I've never had a brother," he said. "You always did," I replied. "You just didn't know." I told him everything, not all at once, not in a flood, just pieces, carefully handed over like fragile glass. He listened, asked questions, flipped through the photos slowly, like each one was a puzzle piece from a life he never imagined existed. When I gave him the locket, he held it gently. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "and she looks like me." "She loved you," I said. "She never wanted to leave you." His eyes watered. He nodded, unable to speak. We sat in silence for a long time, not awkward, not painful, just 2 strangers realizing they weren't strangers after all. When I left that night, he hugged me, not tight, not long, but with meaning. "You came all this way," he said. "I had to," I replied. "You were always meant to be found." The next morning I met Michael again, this time over coffee at a quiet cafe near his home. He looked different now, not in the face, but in the way he carried himself. Yesterday, he had opened the door as a man bracing for confusion. Today, there was something looser in his shoulders, like a small knot had begun to unravel. He smiled when he saw me, a cautious smile, but real. "I didn't sleep much," he said, sitting down across from me. "Me neither." The waitress came and we ordered. Neither of us touched the menus. For a moment, we just stared at the steam rising from our mugs. "I kept thinking about the photo of her," he said. "Of Anna. I've never seen a face that felt so familiar and foreign at the same time." I nodded. "That's how I felt when I first saw your picture. I didn't need proof. I just knew." He sipped his coffee, then set it down. I went home last night and opened a box of my parents' things. I found my birth certificate. You were right. 1974. No hospital listed, no biological parents, just adopted. I never questioned it before, never even thought to. I felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry for dropping all this on you. No, he said firmly. Don't apologize. You gave me something no one else ever did. A name, a history, a mother. His voice cracked on the last word. We sat in silence. After a while, I took out the journal. I want to show you something, I said. It's from our grandfather. He left it for me. It's how I found you. Michael flipped through the pages slowly. His eyes scanned the lines with growing intensity. He stopped at the photocopied letter Anna had written, her goodbye to her son. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, she was trying to protect me. She was scared, I said, and no one listened. He closed the journal carefully, like it was something holy. My parents were kind, he said. Strict, quiet, but kind. I think they believed they were doing the right thing. But there was always something missing. A piece I couldn't name. He looked up. And now I know it was her. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I've been angry for so long, he continued, without knowing why, restless, like I didn't fully belong in my own story. And now I realize I didn't, because half of it was gone. I reached into my bag and handed him the locket. I think this should stay with you. He opened it, looking at Anna's face on one side and his own infant photo on the other. This is the only thing she ever gave me, he said, and it's everything. We left the cafe and walked for a while, neither of us ready to say goodbye. We stopped at a park bench under an old elm tree and I told him more, about Grandpa, about the attic, about how I'd found the envelope inside the Bible. He laughed softly. I always thought Bibles were for guilt, he said, not redemption. Maybe both, I said. We talked for hours. Not just about the past, but about our lives, our careers, relationships, favorite movies, childhood stories that somehow mirrored each other despite everything. At one point, he paused and asked, what was he like? Our father? I inhaled slowly. Complicated, I said. Hard, distant. He built walls and called them morals. I think he believed if he ignored the truth long enough, it would disappear. Michael looked away. Do you hate him? I don't know, I said. Some days, but mostly, I pity him. He lived his entire life hiding from the thing he created, and in the end, he died being loved for a lie. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. I don't need him. I have her now, and I have you. It was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. That night, he invited me to dinner with his wife and 2 daughters. They were warm, welcoming, curious. I didn't overwhelm them with details, just said I was an old friend reconnecting a piece of Michael's past. But as the evening went on, I could see it. How much he loved them. How fiercely he protected his family. And I wondered what Anna would think if she could see him now. The boy she gave up everything for. A father, a husband, a good man. Later, as we stood outside, saying goodbye under a sky full of stars, Michael turned to me. Do you think she ever forgave him? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I said. But I think she forgave us, just for finding each other. He nodded. We hugged again, this time stronger. Promise me something, he said. Don't disappear. I won't. And I meant it. He wasn't just a name I found in a file. He was a part of me, a brother, one I never knew I needed, and now I couldn't imagine life without him. The following week I returned home with a decision made. No more silence. No more secrets. No more preserving the image of a man who had built his life on shadows. It was time for the truth. I called for a family meeting at my parents' house. Just immediate relatives, My mother, Ellie, a few aunts and uncles who had known my father best. Some came reluctantly. Others showed up curious, unsure why I had asked for everyone to gather. When we were all seated in the living room, I placed a box on the coffee table. Inside it, the journal, the photo album, the locket, copies of Anna's letters, and a printed photo of Michael holding his daughter, our niece. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, hands folded in her lap. My Uncle Sam stood with his arms crossed near the doorway. Ellie gave me a reassuring nod. I cleared my throat. I want to talk about someone you all tried to forget, or more truthfully, someone you were told to forget. I picked up the photo of Anna. Her name was Anna Caldwell. She was my father's first love. She was pregnant with his child, and she didn't disappear. She was erased. My mother's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. I continued. She came to Grandpa for help. He turned her away. Then she vanished, and no one ever looked for her. Not the police, not the family, not even my father. I saw discomfort ripple across the room. People shifted in their seats. Some glanced at the floor. She was more than a mistake, I said, louder. Now, she was a person, a mother, and she gave birth to my brother. That got their attention. My aunt gasped. My uncle's arms dropped. I handed Ellie the journal and nodded. She began reading aloud from one of the entries, Grandpa's confession about the night Anna came to the house, the bruise, the panic, the warning. Then she passed around copies of the letter Anna had written to her child. Tears filled my mother's eyes, but still she said nothing. His name is Michael Avery, I said. He's alive, he's well, and he's my family. But how can you know? Sam finally asked. How can you be sure it's true? I placed the photograph of Michael and me on the table. Taken just days before, the resemblance undeniable. Side by side, we looked like echoes. There's no doubt, I said. The room was silent again, until my mother finally spoke. We did what we thought was right. No, I said gently. You did what was easy. What protected reputations. What kept things neat. Her chin quivered. He was my husband, she whispered. I had to stand by him. I understand, I said. But standing by someone doesn't mean standing on top of someone else. She closed her eyes. I loved him, she said. I know. But Anna loved him too. And so did Michael. And they were cast aside. There was no yelling, no anger. Just grief, layered and raw. What do you want from us? Someone asked. I want acknowledgement, I said. I want to stop pretending we don't know what we know. I want his name, Michael's name, to be spoken. I want Anna to be remembered. I want this family to be honest. Finally, Ellie stood beside me. And I want our grandfather's guilt to mean something, she said. Because if it doesn't, if we bury this like he did, then we're just repeating the same cowardice. Slowly, something changed. My Uncle Sam stepped forward and picked up the photo of Anna. She came to me once, he said, voice low. Asked for help. I told her to talk to your dad. She said she couldn't, that she was afraid. He swallowed hard. I've lived with that for a long time. My mother wept openly now, for her husband, for Anna, maybe for herself. We talked for hours. Some stories came out, some remained buried. But the door was open now, and no one could close it again. That night, I began drafting a letter to Michael. I told him what happened, that the family knew, that the silence was over, and that we wanted him to visit when he was ready. 2 weeks later, he arrived. We held a small dinner at Ellie's house. Nothing dramatic, no speeches, just food, wine, and space. He brought his wife and daughters. They were nervous at first, but warmed quickly. Ellie made them laugh. My aunt brought out old photos. My mother gave him a quilt she had made, a quiet gesture, but one that carried more weight than any apology could say. At one point, Michael pulled me aside. You did this, he said. No, I told him. She did. Anna, she never stopped leaving a trail. We just finally followed it. He smiled. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about rewriting the future. Together. A few weeks later, I stood alone, in front of my grandfather's grave. The wind was light, just enough to stir the grass around the headstone. I had been coming here often, not out of guilt, but to feel close to the man who, in his final act, had given me something none of the others ever had. The truth. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter I had written. I wasn't sure who it was for, him, Anna, or myself. Maybe all three. I read it aloud anyway. You waited your whole life to speak the truth. I wish you'd done it sooner. I wish Anna hadn't had to vanish for you to see the cost of silence. But in the end, you chose to pass the torch to me. And I carried it. I found him. I gave her name back. I gave her child a face. And I gave this family something real, something earned. You didn't fix everything, Grandpa, but you opened the door, and I walked through it. Thank you. I tucked the letter beneath a small stone at the base of the headstone and stepped back. The cemetery was quiet, just birds and wind. But it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like peace. Later that afternoon, Michael and I visited the local courthouse. We filed a petition to add Anna Marie Caldwell to the family registry, an act that seemed small on paper but felt monumental in spirit. For nearly 5 decades, she had been left out of the story. Now her name would be printed, preserved, and acknowledged. Michael stood beside me as we signed the forms. She existed, he said softly. And now, legally, permanently, no one can pretend she didn't. From there, we drove to the house where Anna had last lived. The building had changed, new paint, new owners, but the structure was the same. We stood across the street in silence, both of us imagining what it might have been like for her. Alone, pregnant, knocking on doors for help. I took the locket from my pocket and handed it to him again. You don't have to keep it locked in a drawer, I said. She should be part of your home. He smiled and nodded. The next morning, we visited Grandpa's house one last time. Michael walked through the rooms slowly, touching picture frames, glancing at worn furniture, peeking out windows as if trying to imagine the man who once sat in that chair or walked those halls, burdened by the choice to tell or to stay quiet. In the attic, I showed him the chest. We opened it together. He ran his hand across the journal, the letters, the black and white photos. I wish he had met me, he said. I think he always wanted to, I replied. He just didn't know how. Michael turned to me. You're the reason I know any of this. You could have walked away. I shook my head. No, I couldn't. Because when he held my hand that day and said those words, something inside me shifted. I realized that our stories aren't just inherited, they're unfinished, and sometimes it's up to us to write the ending. We stood in silence for a while. Then, as we prepared to leave, he asked if we could stop by the cemetery. We returned to Grandpa's grave, Michael's first time there. He stood quietly for a few moments, then said, I forgive you. 3 words, not shouted, not dramatic, but whole. And I swear in that moment the air changed. That night we gathered the family for dinner. No big speeches, no ceremonies, just laughter, music, and shared stories. Michael sat beside Ellie, his daughters playing with hers in the backyard. My mother approached me in the kitchen. He's kind, she said. He looks like your father, but softer. I nodded. He didn't inherit the silence. She touched my arm. Neither did you. And that was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. I didn't need more. As the evening ended, Michael handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed photo of Anna, the one from the garden, and beneath it, a handwritten message. She never left. She was just waiting to be remembered. I looked up at him. Thank you, I whispered. He smiled. No, thank you. Weeks later, I self-published our story. Not to shame, not to accuse, but to honor. To remember the woman in the red scarf. to acknowledge the boy who grew up without knowing his mother, to give voice to the grandfather who had waited a lifetime to speak. The book was small, quiet, but it reached people. Strangers wrote to me, siblings long lost, children raised in silence, families fractured by fear, but still searching for truth. And in every letter, I saw a reflection of our story. That's when I knew my grandfather's final gift wasn't just a confession, it was permission to listen, to search, to speak. And now that it had been given, I would never go quiet again. If this story moved you, take a moment and let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? And did someone in your family ever carry a secret like this one? Your words matter, and we read every message. And if you believe that telling the truth, no matter how painful, is the first step to healing, then subscribe to Grandfather Great Love. Here we don't just tell stories. We remember the forgotten. We restore the erased. We rewrite what others tried to bury. See you in the next story. And until then, never stop remembering.